The last couple months have been among the hardest of my life. And one of the sad truths is that I've said that multiple times over the last 2.5 or 3 years. And I think maybe some of you out there could probably relate with me on that, where I got myself into or found myself in some situations where after I got out the other end, I looked backwards and said, I think that's the worst thing that I've ever been through, or I think that was the hardest thing that I've ever had to go through. And I am currently speaking to you today, coming out of what I hopefully coming out of another one of these periods. And I haven't been posting as frequently on YouTube as I was earlier this year. And this video is multi-purpose. Its intent is to be transparent and hopefully share with you guys some of what I've been going through and also some of the things that I've learned, because while this has been among the most difficult periods of my life, it's also been one of the most transformative. And the second purpose of this video is to throw out an incredibly imperfect restart of not only this channel, but the practice of being of service to other people and to creating something in the world that my intention is for it to be very helpful to other people, and also to build something that I care about. There's all those things intersecting together. So, what the hell happened? that's that's a great question. Over the last couple months, really going back to, there's a couple threads I could weave in here with you, but when things started going downhill really was at the end of July for me. Um, Last year, I moved from, oh gosh, I mean, it's just the last couple of years for me. There were a lot of ups and downs. I went through some of the best things in my life, some of the most difficult things in my life. And last January, I got to a point where I was ready to launch this YouTube channel more formally. I was launching a mentorship program after working with people one-on-one for a couple of years and getting a really good sense for what was helpful for people in recovery from pornography addiction. Getting together a beta testing group to run through my program to provide feedback for me, and for me to be able to actually see what it looks like for not only for people to go through all the material that I put together, but then also what it's like for me to have this element active in my life. And at the beginning of that period, it was one of the best things ever. And this is a little nugget to pull out of this right away that I want to offer to you guys, which is there's a lot of, like, growing up, especially as boys, this applies to girls too, but I think there's something especially impactful about this for boys, and as we turn into men, as we age. When we're younger, the line of dependency and reliance goes from the adults around us, or maybe that we didn't have, but ideally the adults around us, to us. We are reliant on other people in order to learn, to function, to be disciplined, all of that. To set schedules for ourselves, right? To kick our butt into gear to act when we don't feel like it, to correct behaviors, right? All of the dependency on our personal growth runs in one direction. And one of the most significant turning points and developmental points in the journey from boyhood into manhood is when that line of dependency starts to flip direction. When you start to feel like other people are relying on you in order for their life to work in some important or significant way, that loading of positive responsibility, it sounds on the outside like work, but it's actually the meaning of your life. It is the thing which, in my experience, will grant you access to a source of power and ability to act in the world, which is unrivaled by almost nothing else. To wake up in the morning and feel like I matter because I'm contributing something of value to the world that other people don't just want, but they, in a sense, need. I am filling a need in the lives of other people by me being who I am. Other people are relying on me to be a healthy, well-functioning person, for me to be spiritually healthy, to be living in my integrity, in order for this system to work. That experience is unbelievably powerful. And like I said, this is true for men and for women, but I think there's something very, very particular about how it's helpful for men, and that most of us are missing it. Most of us don't have that experience of younger men or boys, right? Like younger teenagers, that little brother type relationship where somebody is relying on us. They're trying to navigate life and they're looking up to us to say, please show me the way. Many of us don't have that. Most men don't have that at all. And I believe it is a fundamental need of every human being, and especially men. I don't believe that it's possible for us to truly exit the boyhood psychology and enter into manhood until that has happened. Now, to bring that all the way back around, back in January of last year was the most powerful experience of that beginning for me. Launching this YouTube channel, beginning to work with people, infused my life with this really positive sense of responsibility that was healing and empowering and structuring. It was remarkable how much things improved in my life when I made the decision to start being helpful to others. That's also a little nugget in there for some of you. Hopefully, if you're in a position where things are not going well, perhaps you're not in a position where you need to wait for life to give you something. Perhaps you're in a situation where what's needed is for you to give something to life. Now, back onto that main thread after I dropped that Master Oogway Zen parable on your head. Over the course of the next several months, things went incredibly well. I've never felt that level of mental or spiritual health in many ways. As I was working on all this, I was very passionate about what I've been doing. I felt excited about my future. I had things to look forward to. Everything was working in a lockstep function that I was struggling to find in my life in a lot of ways before I began doing this work. In combination with that, and here's a thread that I'm going to introduce. I will talk about this more in later videos, but I'm going to pop this up because it'll come into bear with some of the things I'm going to say later, was the reintroduction of caffeine into my life. Now, I don't want to make this entire video about caffeine, but I will give you a short synopsis of my relationship with it. It's the only thing I've ever taken in my entire life that felt like it fixed my brain. When I was in high school and I drank my first cup of coffee, I went from struggling in school to later getting a 5 on my AP Calculus test, as well as graduating my high school senior year with a 4.3 GPA, all the way to fueling a master's degree in aerospace engineering and a magna cum laude. I don't remember the Latin designation. I graduated with a master's degree in aerospace engineering from the number 7 ranked international aerospace program with a 3.93 GPA. Now, that is not to gloat. That is to give an example of how powerful of a change caffeine made in my life. The introduction of caffeine made me change from a C student on average who was just struggling in many ways to somebody who felt capable and competent. Like my brain was finally able to grasp the outside world. I felt a sense of clarity and functioning that I never felt without it. However, and like I said, there's a deeper rabbit hole that I will get down to in later videos on that topic, because the relationship between ADHD, addiction, particularly pornography and sexual addiction, and the self-medication or abuse of stimulants is unbelievably common. Like, holy cow. Cannot tell you how many guys that I've worked with and that I've met in my journey of recovery who have this very, very difficult relationship with caffeine and stimulants, and also struggle with ADHD. And the point of bringing that up is that this reintroduction of it into my life also began to reintroduce the problems. There is no biological free lunch. Every substance that we consume, while conferring some kind of benefit to us on the front end, will then take from us on the back end. And caffeine is no different. Some people are more sensitive to it than others. Some people never develop a difficult relationship with it. many people at some point in their life will find that they have developed an unhealthy relationship with caffeine. And I, for the first about 7 months, actually maintained a very healthy relationship with it. I was taking one day on, I would drink caffeine for one day, I would take one day off, and I would repeat that. I was stable in my own recovery, right? I'm a person in recovery. I am not a like guru who has magically been eradicated, in whom this disease of addiction has been magically eradicated. I am somebody who struggles with this just as much as anybody else, who is just hopefully a little farther along this path than you are. And like I alluded to earlier, can reach my hand backwards and show you the way in terms of moving forward. But I actively have to, the maintenance of sobriety from addiction is synonymous with continuing to do work on uncovering my own defects, my own shortcomings, the areas in my life where I'm still struggling. The continued growth and work on those elements is the exact same thing as sustaining my recovery, and also protecting myself from getting involved in pro-addictive patterns of behavior, sleep deprivation, eating junk food all the time, isolating, making excuses, making decisions out of fear. I could go down the entire laundry list. These are things that I actively have to do. So in the midst of reintroducing caffeine, now there's stress. Now there's an element of stress that wasn't there before. Now there's an element of feeling disconnected from my emotions in a way that there wasn't there before, right? When we're caffeinated, it tends to give us this rush and this lift of a mood lift, but coming hand in hand with that oftentimes is a muting or a disconnection of negative emotion that we may have been feeling, or in many people's situations, and myself included, have gotten into this. We're actually just paving over the cracks of a more or less just unhealthy life with caffeine. Like I have no consistent sleep. I eat terrible. I'm lonely. This, that, the other thing. And my brain is nuked by the 7 hours I was rolling around in the mud pit of social media reels and shorts. And I use caffeine to just pave over the walls, the cracks in the wall. Now, moving forward for me, I got to travel in Europe for 2 months over the summer, which was incredible. That was a once in a lifetime trip. Things worked out between my day job and everything else to allow me to do it. And it was a really healing experience for me that was much needed. But it was also very destabilizing and reintroduced caffeine in an unhealthy place in my life, where now I wasn't using it to work or to be a tool. It was a necessity for me to function. Massive time zone change, massive jet lag. Now I'm drinking caffeine because I'm tired. This, that, the other thing. I'm not going to go down too far into the weeds, which I may have gone into already. What I started to notice was the destabilization of my own recovery. I started to feel this creeping sense of drift, like this creeping drift back into the danger zone of not feeling grounded and stable, not feeling spiritually healthy, not feeling physically healthy, not finding a routine in my life that was anchoring, having an anchoring routine to a spiritually healthy life is a very, very powerful tool, meaning the routine that is enabling us to live a healthy and spiritual life is like the backbone of that life. When we break the routine, the life that it's creating tends to fall apart with it. And that is exactly what started to happen to me. Upon returning to the United States back in late July, now resuming where I began this video, everything went downhill for me in a very, very remarkable and painful way. I don't understand at this point the exact system of things which caused this, but I entered into a period of depression and anxiety that I have not felt the likes of which for about 7 years. I had the closest that I've come to a panic attack in about 7 years while driving to a 12-step meeting that I was going to. All of a sudden, the ease with which I was able to put down and walk away from caffeine over the previous months vanished. And I found myself having a very difficult relationship with caffeine, where I felt like I needed it to function. I'm now in this chronic urgency mode, where the obligations and responsibilities of my life that were previously empowering now felt like a 1,000,000-pound load that I was struggling not to get crushed under. And that in and of itself is a very interesting dynamic. How there's positive responsibility in our life where somehow it connects us to a sense of larger purpose and meaning and grants us power to act. And then somehow nearly the exact same thing can also become a kind of negative responsibility, a sense of maladaptive loading that is putting expectations for energy output, responsibility, and organization that some part of us is just no longer capable of sustaining. And to zoom out a little bit, and this is where I want to introduce another thread here, is that this has been a pattern in my life for my entire life. I heard somebody once say this that I resonated with a lot, that my experience of life has been a lot like getting shot out of a gun into a pool of water. I come screaming out the barrel at 2,000 miles an hour before slowing rapidly to a halt and then drifting lazily to the bottom, where I lay there waiting for months or however long it is for something to come along and put me back into the barrel so that I can be shot out once again before this pattern repeating. This intensity followed by crash and self-sabotage and burnout has been a repeating pattern. And this is something hopefully you can kind of infer that I am actively working on transforming this. And one of the things that I've learned over the last couple months in the midst of all of this is that how I see it now is that addiction is kind of like an onion. On the outer layer, we just see like it's just the pornography addiction, it's the unwanted sexual behavior. But what we quickly find is that underneath the pornography, there's all these emotional roots. There's trauma, there's depression, there's toxic shame, there's family of origin wounds, there's all of these different things that sort of underlie. There's lust, right? This relationship we have with our sexuality. There's a deficit of relationship and intimacy skills. There's a void of meaning and purpose in our life. There's all these things that are underneath. One of the things that I believe now, after seeing this at work in myself and basically every person that I've ever worked with, is that within that onion is a stress addiction, or a very dysfunctional and maladaptive relationship with stress. And for many of us, that relationship is mediated by stimulants like caffeine, which is where I was alluding to earlier, that I've seen a lot of people that I work with, this difficult or maladaptive, dysfunctional relationship with stimulants. But beyond that, almost everybody that I work with struggles with procrastination, neglect, this feeling like they bounce from one self-imposed crisis to the next in their life. They feel like they're living under what I heard Chris Williamson call the tyranny of the urgent, that everything that feels urgent in my life somehow ends up taking priority over what is actually important. I find myself in a constant mode of firefighting. Like good things can kind of just never land in my life. My life is unstable. When something starts to go good, it somehow turns into a painful crisis in short order in a short period of time. This is this pattern. It's like whoop, whoop, just over and over and over again, getting suplexed by life. And that's something that I have experienced a lot, and just went through yet what appears to be yet another cycle of in my own life, in a way that has been very, very difficult and very destabilizing. Over the last couple months, it has been nearly or seemingly impossible for me to escape old patterns of self-sabotage and unhealthy behavior, and like just trying to get myself back on a consistent sleep schedule has just felt like a nightmare. And again, it's like a switch got turned on in my brain, and all of a sudden I keep finding these excuses that feel so valid in the moment, that are justifying me in acting in self-destructive and self-sabotaging ways. And it's so strange. And one of the things that I believe that I feel like I've learned over the last couple months is that this stress addiction is a function of addiction. It's one of the prerequisites, I would say, that addictive and self-sabotaging cycles and patterns and behavior, it seems to run out of it. Like when this stress addiction is not present, whatever this is, if you don't want to call it stress addiction, whatever this is, when it's not active, addiction isn't active either. And also, I believe that one of the things that I'm starting to notice is that one of its purposes really seems to be distraction. And hang with me here. If you've hung with me until this point, kudos. And I hope that this has been valuable. And I think that what I'm going to end with here shortly will be very valuable or hopefully thought-provoking for you. I believe it was Pascal who wrote in one of his books about a man who is chronically bored. He is bored and he is offered the opportunity to just gamble in order to escape the pain of being eternally and perpetually bored. And he's playing around with this thought experiment. And one of the things that he plays around with is, if I was to give the man all the money that he was gambling for, I would ruin it for him. By having the money, gambling no longer makes sense, and he has nothing to effectively distract him from being bored. The other thing that he realized, though, is that the man must not have... So if you give the man what he wants, it will ruin things for him. If you tell the man, no matter how much you gamble, you'll never win the money, it will also ruin it for him, because now the gambling is actually no different from just being bored. And so we find that there's this very strange reality where, in order for the cycle of distraction to perpetuate itself, you have to simultaneously not have the thing you want, but want it. And this is, I'm going to try to branch these two things together. It's something the edge of something I'm still articulating. And so I hope this makes sense. The function that I see this stress addiction play, among other things, but is this great wheel of distraction. Addiction itself kind of lies in with this, where I talk about positive and negative sobriety, right? That acting out addictively is like one side of the coin, and then fighting against the addiction is the other part. It's these two things which have to go together in order to form this cycle that keeps us distracted and keeps the pain that we're trying to avoid numb. And when it comes to stress, I truly believe that this seems to be the stress cycle, the stress addiction seems to be one of these things where I am in this situation where I desperately want to exit the cycle of stress, yet every decision that I seem to be making keeps it going. Like I want to, yet I don't want to exit this state of stress, of chronic fight or flight, of chronic everything feels urgent, of chronic motive or like rationalization and justification for self-sabotaging unhealthy behavior. It just, there's something about it that like doesn't want to stop spinning. And getting back to the casino and the boredom example, the gambling is preventing the man in this thought experiment from the pain of boredom. And one of the questions that I'm sitting with right now, which I want to float to you as well, is if stress or if pornography addiction is truly distracting you from something that is very uncomfortable, what is it? Or can you, even if you don't maybe know what it is, can you sense emotionally maybe in your body that there is some kind of discomfort or emptiness or pain or fear that you're sitting with that if you were to stop being stressed, you would instantly come into contact with? Is there a way of being, a version of yourself that you feel like suddenly pops into existence when you stop being stressed, that you deeply struggle to be? Is there a void of power? Like you don't feel capable, you don't feel like you're able to act in the world if you're not stressed. Like stress is my survival fuel. Like you don't understand. If I'm not stressed, then I don't do anything. If I'm not stressed, I'm not on time. If I'm not stressed, I don't do my job. If I'm not stressed, I don't do things. And I want to bring this all together with something that I heard, which was unbelievably powerful for me and has been just something sitting at the center of my life over the last couple of weeks, which is I heard a therapist, this guy, if you want to look him up on Instagram, his name is Flynn Skidmore. He's fantastic. He's in a really radical way positively impacted how I approach many of the topics that I teach. And he said something that just like slapped me in the face. And it was this: the energy with which we build a system in our life is the exact energy that system will require of us to maintain it. Let me say that again, because that's a little cumbersome. The energy that we build a system with is the energy that system will require from us to maintain it. So if you build a relationship out of anxiety, you will continually create situations and circumstances in a relationship which reinforce you feeling insecure and anxious. If you build a business out of scamming people and not offering any real value, you will constantly find that the system is requiring you to maintain and to perpetuate this relationship with it. If you lie, this is a fantastic example, I think, because it's very obvious, not to like toot my own horn. I'm like, oh, this is a fantastic example that I'm coming up with here on the spot. But if you lie in a relationship, the system that lie creates will continually ask you to keep maintaining the lie in order for the system to survive. There's something about the relationship, the fuel that we use to build, the energy or the fuel that we use to build our lives, that then creates circumstances that require the maintenance of that energy. And so bringing this back home, one of the things that I looked at and I realized was that in my life, every major system that I've ever built has been built out of stress or caffeine. Really, my academic achievements primarily, which have consumed an absolute unbelievable swath of my life in terms of my mental capital and my energy and my investment, my job as an aerospace engineer now maintained, that required me to maintain this caffeinated, stressed out relationship to my work that I built in college, right? And also when I was in college, I suddenly found myself in this trap. Like I got so dependent on caffeine to function, so dependent on the stress, that if I was to suddenly stop drinking caffeine, I became so incapable of acting that the entire house of cards would have crumbled. Like I couldn't stop being that person, or the system would collapse, right? And I couldn't, I was in a place where the system collapsing would have been catastrophic, like really not good. And I'm suddenly now realizing that I'm doing it again, or I've done it again. I've done it multiple times. I did it in a relationship that I was in. I did it with like the beginning of starting this business and this channel. There's this relationship and the fuel that has been running this. It hasn't been, it's been mixed, but it primarily hasn't been love. It hasn't been just the passion or a creative energy. It's primarily just been stress. Like I have to do this somehow. And out of this, I after I heard this on that podcast I was telling you about, that therapist guy, I feel like I had this this vision like opened up in my mind where I suddenly looked over the rest of my entire life, and it was as if I could see, or I could feel what it would be like to be me when I was 40 or 50 or 60, and surrounded by everything that I'm hoping living out of the stress would ever achieve for me. The financial success, the relationships, the family, like the whatever you want to go down. But I just felt the stress of it. Like I could see the reality that I could have a family, I could have whatever it is that I wanted, but I would still feel like I do today, which is stressed. Like I was seeing that as long as I run my life on this energy, every system that I build for the rest of my life will demand that I stay being like this and relating to creating with this energy, relating to everything with this, the stress or whatever other emotions might be fueling it, fear or insecurity, like the energy that is fueling my creative acts or what I'm building becomes a part of it. And I know maybe that sounds kind of obvious, but to see it in the way that I did was unbelievably powerful. And looking back over the last couple months, I feel like the difficulty that I went through was just a 2x4 in the face from the universe on this truth that I do not want to build a life on stress anymore. And that if I continue to operate and to build my life on stress, I likely will not achieve many of the things that I feel passionate about or that I feel spiritually called to achieve in my life. I likely will not become the version of myself that I want to become because this stress is keeping me stuck. And I will continue to experience these patterns of self-sabotage and the gun shot, I guess would be a bullet shot out of a gun into water phenomenon. And so, the wording that came into my mind as all of this was unfolding was, I feel like caffeine and stress have been the linchpin holding my life together. And the question that immediately came up after that was, and it's okay if this word doesn't make sense or this word works for me, so that's why it came up like this. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine. The word that came up for me is, what would it be like if God was the thing that was holding my life together? What would that life look like? Where the energy that I was operating out of was truth, was love, was creativity, was service, was compassion. And not just in this intellectual way where it's like, oh yeah, I want to create out of love and just have it be this pithy intention when internally I feel miserable and stressed. I mean, really a real embodied connection to love. And that's the energy that I am bringing into my life and building the systems of my life out of. And gosh, there's so many rabbit holes and tangents that I could go down on this. And I want to invite you to ask yourself a couple questions. Hopefully, if this resonated with you, do you resonate with the idea and do you relate to this idea of feeling like you are addicted to stress or that you're under the tyranny of the urgent, that somehow you find yourself feeling like everything that's urgent or everything that's urgent or feels like an emergency in your life is somehow taking priority over what you know is actually important, and that it's causing you to become this person and this version of yourself where, as is said in the Bible, that you are doing the things you say you hate. You're being the person that you say you do not want to be, and it actually appears that you're becoming more of that person over time and not less, despite the urgency that you're feeling convincing you that these are the actions that I have to take in my life today in order to survive and to become who I think this energy is going to allow me to become. What would it be like for your life to not be stuck in a state of survival, but to actually experience thriving? What would it be like to not just be coping in emergency mode all the time? What would it be like to feel like love and presence and courage or passion or inspiration or commitment or dedication or any of these other like virtuous energies were the things that were really fueling you? And maybe you do have a connection to that today. And if you do, that's beautiful, great, that's fantastic for you. But if you're somebody who relates with this idea of just feeling perpetually trapped in stress and using the survival energy to just do everything, I want to invite you to consider maybe living a life where stress is the linchpin holding everything together is not the life you want to live. maybe you also see that the systems you're creating out of this energy seem to be requiring you to stay stressed and to stay in this state of coping and survival in order for that system to continue to function. So, what would it be like if you could stop running? What would it be like if you had the presence, the love, and the compassion to face courageously whatever it is that you're running from? What if it is through facing that you open the doorway to new energies and new connections being available to you, where a life where you're not running on stress and survival becomes an option? Those are questions that I'm sitting with, and I feel very much like I've had a couple glimmers and glimpses of what it's like to operate from a fundamentally different fuel source and energy. But I absolutely cannot say that it has become the default for me. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing is I will be creating a video specifically on my relationship with caffeine and addiction. But one of the things that I am committing to taking the leap of faith on is to completely stop drinking caffeine, because that seems to be a crutch that just like holds this entire house of cards together. To stop drinking caffeine for, I don't know the exact set of time yet, but probably right now I'm leaning towards at least 500 days, imitating a challenge that I saw Chris Williamson from Modern Wisdom embark on to reset his relationship with caffeine. And to begin to take this leap of faith and to discover, like, is there an emotional reality, an energetic reality available out there where I don't have to live in survival mode, where the only two options available to me are not be miserable, depressed, apathetic, procrastinating, be lazy, get nothing done, watch my self-esteem and self-respect erode because I don't seem to have the power to act or do anything, or use caffeine, be stressed out all the time, self-sabotage, never experience any stability, struggle with sleep, watch my health deteriorate, and then just periodically self-detonate. Like, I want to find if there's a third option for me. So I have brought you now to the tip of the spear in my own recovery work where I'm at. And the goal with what I'm doing, as I mentioned, is in part to bring every single one of you along for the ride who resonates and relates with this being part of your experience. I want to find and take this leap of faith, reorder that, take this leap of faith and find a pathway to a more sustainable source of energy to run my life. That's not stress. And beyond that, to become a version of myself who is fundamentally connected to just a different energy, yes, but like who is building different systems in life, where I am showing up as a version of myself that feels more in alignment with the growth and the purpose that I want to walk in and that I feel called to walk in. So this video was a bit of a disorganized rant, but that was actually part of what I intended. I didn't want to go into this super structured. So I hope you guys got some value out of this rant, and in future videos, I will absolutely be keeping you guys posted on what I'm learning, and hopefully I can extract some things from my own life journey and share them with you that will be very helpful for you. And with that said, as per usual, if you are somebody who is actively struggling with pornography addiction and you are looking for freedom and you are looking for help in your life, there absolutely is freedom and a path to freedom available for you. If you are interested in walking that path, what I'd like for you to do is go down into the description below and click on a link to book a call with me. I have a multitude of offers now at this point that I'm working on to meet every single person where they're at. If you're interested in my mentorship, I would love to talk with you about that. If it doesn't look like my mentorship program is a good fit, I've got other options that I can connect you with. So please go down, book a call with me. Let's talk. You don't have to sit being stuck for the rest of your life. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.